Nwanneka returns to the village carrying a silent power in her bag and a new fire in her eyes. And soon the same women who mocked her begin to watch their once loyal husbands drift towards her like moths of a forbidden flame. As the village spirals into confusion, marriages crumble, and the women finally fall to their knees in dust and tears, begging the one they once humiliated to release their homes from the strange spell gripping them. In the middle of it all, Nwanneka must decide whether to keep tasting the sweetness of revenge or listen to the quiet voices asking her how far is too far. In the heart of a sunbright village where the red earth meets wide blue skies, there lived a woman called Nwanneka. She was the kind of woman who walked softly and spoke gently, as if being careful not to bruise the air. She did not quarrel, did not gossip, did not chase village rumors up and down the footpath. Every morning she went to the market with a small basket, bought what she needed, cooked her food, swept her small compound, and went to bed with the crickets singing outside her window. But for all her quietness, the women of the village refused to leave her alone. From her youth, Nwanneka has carried a dream close to her heart. She wanted a tall, kind, God-fearing man, a husband whose eyes were gentle, whose pockets were comfortable, whose words carried both wisdom and laughter. Why should I settle for less when I know what I want? She often told herself as she lay awake at night, listening to the owls hoot. Yet life did not bend to her wishes. The men who came were always missing something. One had wealth like a river but spoke to her as if she were dust. Another was tender and thoughtful but could not keep coin in his pocket. A third smiled beautifully, handsome as the moon after rain, but he treated responsibility like a joke. One maker turned them all down, waiting for the one who would be everything she desired. The season turned. One day, she looked into the broken mirror in her room and saw lines beside her eyes. At 40, the footsteps of suitors faded and the gifts stopped. The greetings grew fewer and hope shrank like clothes under hot water. But she forced herself to live with a calm face, even when her heart trembled. At every meeting under the great Udala tree, at every naming ceremony, every harvest dance, they found new ways to tear at her dignity. Some would step close with false sweetness in their voices. Auntie Nwanneka, one would say, when will we come and dance at your child's naming ceremony now? Her smile would be sharp and bright, but her eyes would be watching, always watching for the hidden nails in their words. Another woman would shake her head dramatically, loud enough for everybody to hear. Hurry, oh, Auntie Nwanneka. Time does not wait for any woman, and the belly has its own clock. Oh. Don't say I did not tell you. Then they would all laugh, pressing their wrappers to their mouths, pretending it was just a joke. Sometimes in the evening, they passed in front of her compound, walking slowly, whispering and giggling in voices they carried easily over the low fence. Children watched and learned that mocking was a game adults played. One maker held her tears like water in a calabash, steady, steady. She would not let it spill where eyes could see. But when the moon climbed high and she shut her door, her strength crumbled. She lay on her raffia mat bed, pressed her face into her pillow, and cried until the fabric was wet and cold against her cheek. Night after night, she asked quietly, what did I do to them? Is my womb their business? Is my ring finger their own? Ekwa? What kind of problem is this? No answer came, only the song of frogs outside and the beating of our own tired hearts. One afternoon, when the sun sat directly above the village square, the day decided to wound her deeper. There had been a small misunderstanding over something minor, a missing stool, a misplaced calabash. Voices rose like smoke, and before long, a woman known for her sharp tongues faced one naked before everyone gathered there. Her eyes flashed like flames, and anger burned away any pretense of politeness. Keep quiet there, the woman shouted, pointing a stiff finger. What do you know about being a real woman? You, no husband, no child, just walking up and down this village, wasting government space. Even the wind has more purpose than you. The crowd fell silent. The insults hung heavy in the air, heavier than Hamatan dust. This was no longer teasing. This was a knife thrown in open daylight. Nwanneka felt the word cut through her, slow and deliberate. She stood very still, as if movement would cause her to shatter. No sound came out of her mouth. Her eyes were burning with tears, but no tears fell yet. She turned and walked away, each step stiff, each breath sharp. That night, in the darkest corner of her room, she wept until her body shook. Then slowly she stopped crying. She wiped her face with the edge of her wrapper, stared into the shadow, and whispered, "Enough of all this. These people take my silence for weakness. They will soon learn who they are playing with. I will show them how the game is played." In that moment, a seed of resolve took root inside her, hard, cold, and determined. Before the cock crowed twice the next morning, Nwanneka has tied her wrapper tightly and packed a small bag. She locked her door and began to walk, leaving the familiar footpaths behind. Dust rose around her ankles as she journeyed towards a neighboring village, a place older women spoke of in low voices. There, under tall trees where the wind always seemed to whisper, lived her late mother's closest friend, a woman called Mama Ijele. Mama Ijele was no ordinary elder. People said the forest itself respected her. She was a herbalist of great skill, one whose charms could bend stubborn hearts, calm raging storms of sickness, or bring justice when human hands failed. When Nwanneka reached her compound, the air felt different. It was heavy with herbs, smoke, and something unseen. She sank to her knees the moment she saw the old woman sitting on a wooden stool, pounding leaves in a mortar. "Mama," Nwanneka cried, with her voice breaking apart, "I cannot carry this shame anymore. The women in my village mock me every day. They laugh because I have no husband, no child. They pour fire into my ears and salt into my heart. Mama, I am tired. Help me. Give me something that will silence them forever." Her tears soaked the dusty ground as she bowed her head. Mama Ijele paused, holding her petals mid-air, her eyes sharp and deep like a vulture's. She studied Nwanneka's face. For a long time she said nothing, only the distant sound of birds filled the spaces between them. At last she spoke in a long and firm voice. "My daughter, the path you are asking for is not a small one. It is a road that bends and sometimes bites. Are you sure you want to walk it?" Without hesitation, Nwanneka lifted her head. "Hey, yes, oh, Mama, I have seen shege in those women's hands. I am ready, oh." That evening, Mama Ijele beckoned Nwanneka into a small inner hut. The walls were lined with calabashes, feathers, bones, and bundles of dried plants. A strange sweetness and bitterness hung in the air. From a hidden corner, the old woman brought out a tiny clay pot, no bigger than a child's two hands. Its mouth was sealed with red cloth, tied with black thread. Mama Ijele said, "Inside this pot is a dark powder mixed from roots, ashes, and secrets." She leaned close to Nwanneka's ear and whispered instructions: when to use it, how to use it, and on whom. Once they taste it, Mama Ijele said, her eyes glinting in the dim light, their feet will forget the way home. Their hearts will dance to your tune, like witches dancing to the piper's tune. But remember, everything in this world has a season. One day you must decide when enough is enough. Nwanneka's heart pounded like a drum. She accepted the clay pot with both hands, holding it reverently as a newborn. "Thank you, Mama," she said. The tears in her eyes dried up immediately. "I will not waste this gift." The old woman only grunted and turned back to her herbs, as if she had just handed over a broom instead of a power. Before dawn broke fully, Nwanneka began the journey back to her village, the little pot wrapped carefully in clothes and tucked into her bag like a secret waiting to change everything. When Nwanneka stepped back into her village, the familiar sight seemed different, as if the ground itself knew something was about to change. Chickens scratched in the dust, children ran past laughing, women bent over their cooking pots. No one knew that in the clothes pressed against her side is a volcano waiting to erupt. She did not rush in. Over time, she had learned moves slowly but surely. In the days that followed, she put her plans into motion. After years of eating alone, one naked suddenly announced that she was opening a food place and palm wine corner at the edge of the main road. People laughed at first. Eh? So she wants to feed other people's family while she has none. Now wow. But curiosity is stronger than mockery. When the small structure was finally ready, its roof of shining zinc, its benches smoothed and arranged, its pots scrubbed until they gleamed, the air around the food place carried the smell of pepper soup, onion, and hope. She named it Nwanneka's Heart, and from the first day its fire was lit, the village began to drift towards it like moths to a flame. Smoke coiled into the air, carrying the aroma of goat's meat pepper soup, roasted plantain, fried fish, and thick soups that clung lovingly to morsels of fufu. Music from a speaker floated out, mixing with the clink of calabashes and low laughter. Men passing by could not help turning their heads. Nwanneka smiled politely as customers arrived, moving with calm grace between the fire and the wooden tables. But beneath that calm, she was watchful, counting which man belonged to which woman, not forgetting the husband of the woman with the sharp tongue that had torn her open. She said nothing and did not rush either. She was waiting for the right moment to let the dark powder inside the clay pot taste the open air. Soon, word spread beyond the village. People from neighboring communities began to stop at Nwanneka's hut after market days and long journeys. Have you tasted her pepper soup? One would ask. It is as if the pot knows your name. That woman can cook, oh. Another replied. The place was never empty. Men gathered there after the day's work, dust still on their feet, sweat still on their brows, with hunger singing in their bellies. Whenever the husbands of the women who had mocked her entered one Neka's shop, one Neka changed. Her smile became deep. Her voice became softer and sweet like a new wife trying to satisfy her husband. Her hands more careful as she prepared their meals herself. While the other customers were served by assistants, these men received plates from her own fingers. No one noticed the way she sprinkled a pinch of dark powder into their food, whispering under her breath the words Mama Ijele had taught her. The first time she did it, her heart raced so loudly she could hardly hear the music playing in the background. But when the man took his first spoonful, closed his eyes, and sighed with contentment, something inside her relaxed. It has begun. She watched him eat, lick his fingers, and then order another plate. When night wrapped the village in darkness, he was still there, laughing loudly, telling stories, his feet stubbornly ignoring the path to his compound. Day by day, the change spread like oil on water. The men returned again and again, drawn to one Neka's hut as if invisible hand guided them. Work finished, and instead of hurrying home, they drifted to her place like bees returning to its hive, settling themselves on benches that soon felt more familiar than their own stools at home. The little clay pot stayed hidden, but its power doing wonders with every plate she served. It did not stop at staying late, oh. Little by little, the men began to help. At first, one stood to carry empty plates to the washing area. Another, seeing her lift a heavy pot, jumped up to help her shift it. Soon, some of them tied wrappers around their waists, rolled up their sleeves, and started washing plates without being asked. Others wiped tables, swept the compound, or fetched firewood with cheerful obedience. Wahala Pro Max. From morning till deep into the night, one Neka's head buzzed with life, and the men moved through it like bees in a hive. They forgot the sound of their children's laughter at home. They forgot the way their wives' cooking smelled. When their wives waited in the doorway, looking down the road, listening for footsteps, only the night answered. The women who had once sharpened their tongues on one Neka's sorrow began to taste fear. At first, they tried to make light of it. He is just enjoying himself, Jare. Let him have some fun. They told one another, but as days became weeks and weeks began to stretch dangerously, their smiles thinned. Their husbands came home late or not at all. Their money stayed in their pockets until it reached Nwanneka's counter. Their eyes, once warm when they entered their compounds, now looked distant, as if home were a place they had visited long ago. 2 moons passed, then almost three. The village slowly twisted into a new shape. The very women who had laughed at Nwanneka's empty compound now woke to find their own yards quiet and their cooking pots untouched. Their husbands, strong men who once strode like owners of the land, were now spending their days and nights at Nwanneka's food place, cooking, serving, washing, and smiling like eager apprentices. Some men tied faded wrappers around their waists and stirred great pots of soup. Others stood behind the makeshift bar, refilling calabashes of palm wine and wiping spills with practiced hands. A few arranged chairs, welcomed strangers, and greeted customers like faithful workers. And where was Nwanneka? She sat beneath a shade tree at one corner, in her neatly tied wrapper, hands busy counting money. She watched them with a smiley face and calm satisfaction of someone who had once been ignored and now commanded quiet loyalty. The women tried everything they knew. They went into Nwanneka's house one by one, then in pairs. My husband, let us go home. One pleaded softly, touching his arm. He barely glanced at her. Home? Which home? I am busy, he replied, and returned to his plate. Another woman, her voice shaking with hurt, begged her husband to remember their children. He shrugged her off, eyes gazed with an obedience that was not his own. Prayer meetings multiplied, fasting began. Elders spoke wise words, but the men's feet still walked the same path to Nwanneka's heart and nowhere else. As the sun beat down one hot afternoon, the women decided their quiet begging was not enough. They gathered their wrappers, tied them firmly, and walked together to the food place. Dust rose behind them like a small storm as they moved like an angry river. Customers turned to look. The men froze in the middle of their task. Nwanneka sat in her usual place, sipping palm wine from a calabash, her eyes half closed in lazy contentment. Why are you doing this to us? They cried in unison, their voices trembling with a mixture of rage and pain. What have we done to deserve this kind of shame? The air thickened. A fly buzzed between them and the counters. For a heartbeat, the village held its breath. Nwanneka opened her eyes slowly, as if waking from a pleasant dream. She studied their tear-streaked faces, their trembling lips, their desperate eyes. Then unexpectedly she laughed. It was not the soft laugh she sometimes used with customers. This was loud, sharp, and full of something dark. It bounced off the walls, making even the cooking pot tremble. You are asking what you did? She asked, rising from her stool. Her voice carried easily across the compound. You mocked me. You insulted me. You turned my pain into your evening entertainment. You asked when I would marry, when I would give birth, as if my life were a joke to fill the gap in your own stories. Look around you now. Where are your husbands? She swept her arms towards the men, who stood staring blankly, hands still holding plates and spoons. They are here, working for me, serving me, and this is how it will be. The women fell on their knees, some in anger, some in pleading, but Nwanneka clapped her hands twice, a sharp sound that snapped the spell of silence. Oh yeah, out! She shouted. This is not your home. You laughed when I cried. Now it is your turn. At her signal, the men moved like guards under instruction at a palace. They stepped forward. They started pushing their own wives towards the gates like stubborn goats. They headed them out into the road as if they were troublesome customers, not family. The women stumbled away, their sobs filling the air while laughter and music rose behind them once more. Days rose into weeks and then into months. The harmattan came with its dry winds, left, and the rains returned. Still, the story remained the same. The men stayed at Nwanneka's hut from morning till the stars began their slow journey across the sky. And sometimes they slept there on the benches when sleep finally came knocking. Their homes grew quiet like abandoned shrines. The women who had once trotted proudly now woke before dawn to stretch their few coins and cook whatever they could for their children. Some began selling firewood, others roasted corn by the roadside, while a few carried trays of groundnuts on their heads, under the hot sun. They were tired, hungry, and ashamed. Their husbands, who should have been the pillar of their houses, were wiping tables and scrubbing pots for another woman with their minds trapped in a fog. Children asked questions their mothers could not answer. Mama, when is Papa coming home? The little ones asked at night. Some older children, angry and confused, refused to greet their fathers when they caught sight of them at Nwanneka's place, moving like strangers in familiar bodies. The women tried to stand strong, but memories of the times they had mocked Nwanneka now burned like hot iron inside their hearts. Each insult they had thrown at her returned like a mirror, showing them their own cruelty. Through it all, Nwanneka watched. She sat with her calabash and her counting clothes with her fingers flipping through notes and coins. Each evening, as the men worked and the women suffered, she felt a strange kind of peace, a hard, stony peace that had grown from years of silent tears. For the first time, she thought, life was no longer laughing at her. She was the one laughing. Yet, in the darkest corner of the night, when even the drum slept, a small voice sometimes whispered to her, how long will this continue? She turned her face away from that voice and listened instead to the clink of money. At last, the suffering became too heavy to carry, and something inside the woman broke. One morning, their eyes swollen with sleeplessness, with bodies thin from worry, they gathered again in the village square. This time there was no pride in their steps and no sharpness in their voices. They walked as people who had seen the edge of a cliff and like rejected cows. They made their way to Nwanneka's hut and stopped at the entrance. Smoke rose from the cooking area. The men were already busy, chopping vegetables, stirring soup, cleaning cups. Nwanneka sat in her usual corner, swirling palm wine in her calabash. The women did not shout or accuse. They fell to their knees in the dust with their head bowed and spoke in trembling unison like children on the assembly ground. Sister Nwanneka, forgive us. We mocked you. We made you cry. We called you names because you were not married, because you had no child. We forgot that life is not the same for everyone. We are sorry. Please release our husbands, Biko. Nne, we are begging you. Their tears washed small clean paths down their dusty cheeks as they stretched their hands towards her. Nwanneka did not look at them at first. She raised the calabash to her lips and drank slowly, as if their words were nothing but the usual village chatter. Sorry, she finally said in a calm voice. After all the years you turned my pain into gossip, you think a single sorry will wipe it away. No, I do not forget so easily. She turned her face away, staring at the busy men with a gaze that said they belonged to her now. But the women did not leave. Something stronger than shame rooted them to the spot. Slowly they rose from their knees and did something no one expected, not even themselves. One woman walked past her husband, past one Nwanneka, and went straight to the stack of dirty plates. She tied her wrapper tightly, rolled up her sleeves, and began to wash. Another picked up a broom and started sweeping. A third entered the smoky kitchen, took a spoon and began stirring soup beside the man who had once been her partner in famine and laughter. What began with three women spread like a Harmattan fire. Before long, many of them were walking inside one Nwanneka's hut, side by side with their husbands, eyes lowered, faces wet with silent tears. They did not ask again. They understood that some lessons required not just words, but humility. For 2 weeks, the women and their husbands worked in Nwanneka's food place. The rising sun found women scrubbing the compound, washing greasy pots, plucking chickens, and serving customers with forced smiles. In the evening, they wiped sweat from their foreheads with the back of their hands, their bodies aching and their hearts heavier than ever. Their children watched from afar, wondering why their mothers now labored in the very place they had stolen their fathers. Nwanneka observed all this from her chair. At first, her heart remained hard, like ground that had not seen rain for years. They deserve it, she told herself. Did they not make me wash my pillows with tears? But as the days passed, other images began to rise in her mind. She remembered herself, younger, sinking to her knees in her room, clutching her chest as the weight of their words pressed down. She remembered walking alone to Mama Ijele's compound, the dust burning her feet, sorrow burning her throat. One evening, as the sun bled red into the horizon, she watched one of the women, a particular cruel one from the past, scrubbing a pot so fiercely her hands shook. A child hovered at the gate, calling softly, Mama, I am hungry. The woman blinked quickly, swallowing her tea, and motioned for the child to wait. Something shifted inside Nwanneka then, something she had kept buried under anger and triumph. By the end of the second week, she could no longer ignore the quiet voice that had been whispering at the edges of her thoughts. These women had tasted a portion of her pain. They had bent their pride until it touched the dust. Had the lesson not sunk deep enough? One night, while the crickets sang and the lanterns flickered lazily, Nwanneka sat with a little clay pot in her hands. She turned it over slowly, feeling the roughness of its surface. Everything in this world has a season, Mama Ijele has said. Perhaps the season of revenge was nearing its close. The next morning dawned clear and cool, a thin mist resting over the village like a sleeping veil. Nwanneka rose before anyone else, tied her wrapper, and took the small clay pot from its hiding place. Its red cloth covering looked dull with age, but the power inside it still felt alive. Humming faintly against her palms, she walked into the compound of Nwanneka's hut and stood in the center, where countless footsteps had trampled the earth smooth. The men had not yet arrived. Only a few women were there, cleaning the remains of yesterday's work. They paused to stare at her, sensing that something different was in the air. Nwanneka did not speak to them. She knelt on the hard ground, untied the red cloth, and let a small measure of the dark powder spill into her hand. The smell that rose was sharp, earthy, and ancient. She whispered words learnt under the smoky roof of Mama Ijele's hut, words that spoke of release, of endings, of turning back what had been turned. Her voice was low but steady, weaving through the still air. Then gently she sprinkled the powder onto the ground in a slow circle, right where the men often stood to receive her instruction. When she finished, she clapped her hands loudly 3 times, the sound echoing off the walls like small bursts of thunder. Not long after, the men began to arrive, yawning, stretching, ready to begin another day at Nwanneka's hut. They walked into the compound and, as always, moved to their usual places near the pot, the plate, the bar. But then something strange happened. Their eyes flickered, hands stilled mid motion. One man dropped the cup he was holding. Another let a spoon slip from his fingers. Their faces shifted, as if a heavy cloth were being lifted slowly from their minds. They looked around, really looked as if seeing the place for the first time. Confusion clouded their features. What am I doing here? One muttered. Another rubbed his eyes, turned, and saw his wife standing nearby with a rag in her hand. Ngozi, he whispered, as if she had returned from a far journey, throughout the compound. Plates clattered to the ground as the spell unwound itself like old rope. Silence fell, thick and trembling, without needing to be told. The men began to gather their things. Some picked up their worn clothes, others dusted off their wrappers. They walked past Nwanneka without hatred, without gratitude, only a bewilderment and a deep, bone-tired sadness. One by one, they stepped out of Nwanneka's hut and onto the road that led back to their homes, like dreamers finally waking up. The women stood frozen for a heartbeat. Then the truth hit them all at once. With cries that cracked in the middle, they ran after their husbands, clutching their arms, pressing their faces into familiar shoulders. Tears of relief wet the backs of their neck and the front of shirts. Children, seeing their fathers on the path, ran from doorways with shouts of joy, wrapping small arms around legs they had almost forgotten. Many of the women turned back to where one Nwanneka stood in the compound. She had not moved from the spot where she had sprinkled the powder. Her face was calm again, but there was something soft around her eyes now. Some of the women opened their mouths to speak words of thanks, but she lifted her hands gently. Go, she said quietly. Take your husbands home, feed your children, and remember this: never mock another woman for what she does not have. You do not know the battle she is fighting. You do not know the doors that life has closed or opened for her. Today, the tables turned in my favor. Tomorrow, they may turn again in yours or against you. They listened, their heads bowed like tall grass in the wind. The villagers never forgot what had happened at Nwanneka's hut. They told the story in low voices, by firelight and under mango trees, passing it to their children and their children's children. So, whenever tongues began to sharpen at the mention of a woman without husband or child, someone would clear their throat and say, "Remember Nwanneka. Remember how quickly the world can spin." And so the lesson lived on. Life has its own way of humbling the proud and lifting the broken. Respect a seed. Whosoever plants mockery should not be surprised when the harvest tastes bitter. And this is the end of today's story. But remember, every story carries a hidden wisdom, a seed of truth planted deep within our hearts. If this story taught you, made you laugh, or opened your eyes, then don't let it stop here. There are many more tales waiting to be told, full of mysteries, laughter, lessons, and suspense from the heart of Africa. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next story. And if you enjoyed this one, drop a comment below. Share your thoughts, your laughter, or the lesson you are taking with you today. Until we meet again in the next story, stay curious, stay inspired, and let the spirit of our stories keep your heart alive. Subscribe now and become part of our growing family of storytellers. Bye bye.